Good morning, everybody. I'm Anders Malmberg, Deputy Vice Chancellor of Uppsala University, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you here to this beautiful Aula Magna of our university. Dear representative of the Nobel Laureate, distinguished guests, colleagues and students, Alfred Nobel, honorary doctor at this university in 1893, was a man of vision. He decided to use his fortune to honor, and I quote, "the person who shall have done the most or the best work for fraternity between nations, the abolition or reduction of standing armies, and of peace, and for the holding and promotion of peace congresses." Doing so, he did more than anybody before him to raise the awareness of the importance to promote peace around the world. Working for peace can be hard and not always rewarding. In the light of the current situation in North Korea, I would like to remind you of a quote by the 1982 Peace Prize laureate Alva Myrdal, alumna of this university, who said, "It is of the greatest importance that people and governments should realize that it is more dangerous to have access to nuclear arms than not to possess them." She stated a point that is by now obvious to most of us, I think. The question is, what can we do about it? It is therefore an honor to welcome here to the university representatives of this year's Nobel Peace Prize, representatives from ICAN, the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, with the Executive Director Beatrice Finn. We are happy to see you here and eager to listen to what you have to say about the current situation, of course. This session is co-organized by Uppsala University and the student association Utrikespolitiska Föreningen. So on behalf of both the organizers, I wish you all a warm welcome. I will now give the floor to Professor Peter Wallensteen, who will further introduce ICAN and moderate the discussion to follow. So thank you all for coming, and Peter, please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prorector, Professor Anders Malmberg. It's really a great pleasure to be here. We have managed to make this a little of a tradition that all the laureates of the Nobel Prize should come to Uppsala, and that includes, of course, the Peace Prize. And as many of you know, I'm a professor of peace and conflict research, and in that capacity that I'm asked to lead this discussion today. So we are really very happy to have here. Next to me is Beatrice Finn. Most welcome. You are the Executive Director for the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, ICAN, since 2013. And of course, we have noticed that you have a background studying international relations at Stockholm University. We have heard about this university here. And then also law at the University College in London. And you have been involved with ICAN since it's really started, and you live in Geneva. And for a while, I think you were also involved with the International Women's League for Peace and Freedom. Next to Beatrice is Josefin, Josefin Lind, who is the Secretary General of the Swedish Physicians Against Nuclear Weapons, SLMK in Swedish. It's a part of the international movement against nuclear weapons among physicians. She has studied peace and conflict studies and gender studies at another university we heard about, in Malmö. And she has been with SLMK since 2009 and is a member of the board of ICAN. And just for full disclosure, I am a member of the scientific board of SLMK, so you know, and there are actually several members of that board present here today. Next to Josefin is Ogi Gurgic, who is a master student. He has a master degree already. He wants a second one, and is doing master and peace and conflict research here at Uppsala University.
Finally, someone.
And he is also a Rotary Peace Fellow, and I've seen several Rotarians here in the audience as well, so it's a great pleasure. So as the Prorector said, it is interesting to see that we have other people from Uppsala that have been involved with the peace efforts. And it is actually exactly 35 years ago since Alva Myrdal received the Peace Prize, together with Mr. Garcia Robles from Mexico. So it was very much a Swedish-Mexican operation, you can say. And she was, of course, involved as a ambassador and minister of the government, one of the few ministers of government for disarmament. And when she got the prize, the committee wished to focus attention on what, despite the many gloomy prospects, nevertheless constitutes a bright spot. And that was the efforts that Alva was doing. And of course it is depressing to say that almost exactly the same terms could have been used today, 35 years later. But there are some achievements in this period, and I wish that we can, in this panel, discuss them a bit. One is the so-called Humanitarian Pledge, which the committee, the Norwegian Nobel Committee, actually mentioned, as it draws attention to the catastrophic humanitarian consequences of any use of nuclear weapons. 129 states have signed this pledge, which is really impressive, started by Austria. And of course, ICAN has been involved in that, as well as what the committee called the groundbreaking efforts to achieve a treaty-based prohibition of nuclear weapons. And that is the treaty that was signed on the 7th of July this year, and 122 members of the UN member states have then signed this treaty. So we will come back and discuss this treaty a little more as well. And in particular, it's important to see that the committee says that this year's Peace Prize is a call upon all these states to initiate, those that have nuclear weapons, to initiate serious negotiations with a view to the gradual, balanced and carefully monitored elimination of almost 15,000 nuclear weapons in the world. And indeed, Alva Myrdal would have agreed, and we are here 35 years later. So that's a little of the background, and the discussion will be like this, that we first will start a discussion here in the panel, and I will then open up for questions or comments from the audience, and we have our marshals here with the microphone, but I will tell them where to go. So Beatrice, again, many congratulations. It's been a fabulous work you have been doing, and all the people in ICAN. So where were you when you got this phone call, and did you expect it in some way?
Thank you very much. It's so nice to be here. This is much prettier than Stockholm University. It's a very impressive room. We were in the office, in our tiny little office, where it's 3.5 people work in Geneva, and we were watching the live the coverage of this. My colleague is Norwegian, so she was watching the NRK live show, and we were just very, very excited to be, because we knew we were nominated, and suddenly someone speculated about ICAN, and we thought that was so exciting. I mean, we were not going to win, of course, never, but it was just really exciting. And I was preparing, because we thought that it was, we were quite, confident it was going to be the Iran deal. So I was sitting there trying to type up, like, what would we say if they win? Because it's nuclear weapons related, we have to comment. And then the phone rings. And it's someone who sounds very Norwegian on the phone.
Yeah.
And he spoke so slowly. He introduced himself from the Nobel Committee, and I was like, turn the volume down, turn the volume down. And my first thought, I wonder if he's calling to ask for someone else's number. And I just shock.
Yeah.
There's a recording of this, and I mostly say, wow.
Yeah.
Not the most eloquent moment of my life, but really nice. Yeah, it was extremely overwhelming. There's even a video. Once my colleagues found out what it was, they started filming. You can see me like sort of leaning towards the window, just.
Yeah, no, it's you don't get that phone call very often. Josefin, where were you when you got to know about this?
I was home with a fever.
Oh,
I'd been chatting with Beatrice all morning, and she said, "Oh, I got a missed phone call from Norway." It's like, how can you miss a phone call today? And then after like 10 minutes, it's a journalist. And I got so sweaty over the fever, and then I was so nervous. I had to have to take a shower. So I got back, and I asked, "What's the secret code? If they call, you have to send me a secret code." And she didn't reply. I was like, waiting. Nothing happened. Got closer to 11. You were all silent. Like, oh no, are they going to do it? So I watched TV and found out by the TV. And I almost fainted.
yeah.
Both
almost
from
fainted.
the shock
dear.
and fever.
Yeah. Okay.
But I got fine after that. So if you have a fever, get a Nobel Peace Prize and you will be fine.
Yeah. Okay. That's something for the medical sciences to pick up on. Yes. Okay, so Beatrice, tell us a bit about ICAN and what the work has been and the focus here on the ban.
It's a campaign full of really remarkable people, but just ordinary people as well. I mean, it's just the most extraordinary, ordinary people, I think. We're a bunch of non-governmental organizations, some of them really big, some of them very, very small, that just got together, very much inspired by the campaigns to ban landmines and cluster munitions. With this idea that working together, working in a coordinated way across different areas is the way forward. It makes us more powerful. So we got together, worked very closely with governments and international organizations like the Red Cross movement, for example, the United Nations, and also academics and experts, researchers, to kind of look at nuclear weapons as not a special weapon. It's a weapon. I mean, it has more effects and more devastating effects, more long-term effects than others, very unique ones. But it's still just a weapon. But somehow we've made this weapon into much more, almost like a power symbol, something that guides international relations. But if you break it down and look at it the way we've looked at chemical weapons, biological weapons, landmines, cluster munitions, we base our solutions to those problems on facts, not just sort of theoretical abstract concepts of what we wish they would do. But what happens when a nuclear bomb is dropped? What would the consequences be? That can't be legal under international humanitarian law. Weapons that indiscriminately slaughter civilians should not be legal to have and use. So we ban them.
Yeah, very, very easy. Yeah. Okay, Josefin, can you say something about the Humanitarian Pledge? What is that, and how does that fit into this?
The Humanitarian Pledge, as you previously said, Peter, was launched by Austria at the third conference on humanitarian impact of nuclear weapons in December 2014. And before that, it has been a quite long and hard journey to put focus on the humanitarian consequences of nuclear weapons. But Austria took this knowledge and made it to a pledge that they started, that Austria would fill the legal gap to prohibit and eliminate nuclear weapons. And they encouraged other states to join and also to cooperate with civil society, international organizations, to put this forward and start. So this was really where everyone understood what was going to happen. I think we knew for quite a long time, but I think this is where states could sign on and show their commitment to do this. And it was a really useful tool for us in ICAN to collect states, to show the support and build confidence amongst a group of states to lead the process to start prohibit nuclear weapons. So it was a cooperation between ICAN and a group of states to build the momentum that has been that we have been working on for a couple of years.
Very good. So we have these two things to discuss a little, and Arjen, you have looked a little at the treaty, and there has been a bit about a debate around this as well. So let's hear what is the treaty in particular. How do you see it?
Well, before I start with that, I would really like to say that I'm honored to be a part of this distinguished panel, and this is not something that I planned when I applied to come to Uppsala. So before sharing my thoughts regarding the treaty, I would also like to use this opportunity to congratulate ICAN for winning this prestigious prize. I really think this is a very well-deserved acknowledgement, and I really hope that it will serve as an inspiration to other civic initiatives which also assume a humanitarian perspective on global issues, and then they will be as assertive as ICAN was during its campaign. So now that I have said that, I can allow myself to be a bit critical, but over the treaty and its provisions.
Now the nice words are over.
not towards ICAN, because I'm a very fan of ICAN. So I assume that many of you actually came here wanting to listen to about Trump and North Korea. We could talk about it as well, but we also need to discuss some legal implications. But I promise it won't be boring. So the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, we do not have yet an appropriate acronym for that, so we refer to it as the Ban Treaty. So it is meant to be a legally binding instrument that seeks to unequivocally outlaw the possession and use of nuclear weapons. I do think that this is a landmark achievement, the adoption of that treaty, but I'm not sure whether this is the final instrument that will bring about the global nuclear disarmament, and I'm sorry to say that. So the concerns I have about the treaty actually refer to its verification regime. So the verification is actually the crucial component of the disarmament, because its purpose of the verification is to allow us to be confident that we got rid of the nuclear weapons. So when it comes to this treaty and this provision, it basically lays out three different arrangements. Two of those arrangements pertain to nuclear weapon states, and the third one refers to the non-nuclear weapon states. So when it comes to those first two, I would not, it's bad to comment on that because they cannot work like that in practice, but the thing is that the agreement was negotiated in the absence of nuclear weapon states. And as we know, all the 8 or 9 nuclear weapon states and their allies boycotted the negotiations, unfortunately, so their expertise was obviously missing. And I do think those states actually failed to acknowledge the existence of the treaty, but once they do so, they say that even if we were considering to disarm, we would not be able to do it under these conditions, and I understand why, because this is something that creates security dilemma among all of those states. And we need to be mindful of that. And I do think that at some point they will need to gather around the negotiation table, and they will need to define those procedures for disarmament verification themselves. Nobody can do it for them because they all have decades of experience in developing nuclear weapons. So they know what kind of guarantees they expect to see from each other. But what we can do, so we cannot do this instead of them, but what we can do is to pressure them and to help them come to a political will, which ICAN was doing quite well. So having said that, I would move to the third verification regime, which actually refers to the non-nuclear weapon states. And this is where I have concerns, because according to the Ban Treaty, non-nuclear weapon states are required to maintain their existing safeguards or to at least conclude a comprehensive safeguards agreement with International Agency for Atomic Energy. So this is actually the problem. This is clearly at odds with the non-proliferation regime established under the NPT and the Atomic Agency. The thing is that the NPT, in its provisions, does not specify any specific agreements that states need to have. It actually points out to the verification, the statute and the safeguards system of IAEA. And this was a very visionary provision, which allowed, because it anticipated that safeguards might evolve over time, which they have. So, and according to the current practice of the agency, the combination of comprehensive agreement and additional protocol is actually what represent the highest form of guarantees. And the Ban Treaty left out the additional protocol. So I will now explain what that additional protocol means, if you give me just one more minute. So first of all, a comprehensive agreement, it's an instrument from the 1972, and it's only focused on declared nuclear activities. So according to the comprehensive agreement, International Atomic Agency can only verify the absence that the declared nuclear activities are not being diverted to the military purposes. However, the experience with Iraq showed that it's not enough, because states might choose not to declare all their nuclear activities, that they might choose to develop clandestine nuclear programs. So as a response to that, additional protocol was developed, and it allows and empowers IAEA with the ability to also detect and declare. So only when we have both comprehensive agreement and additional protocol, IAEA can confirm that there are no diversion of declared nuclear activities and that there are no undeclared activities within a state. So having all that in mind, one would expect that the ban treaty would first reinforce all those instruments. But it failed to do so. It omitted the additional protocol. So it's actually a situation that threats to undermine the credibility of the treaty, but also the non-proliferation regime, because it actually goes back to the solution which was considered inadequate for 20 years now. So since we in Uppsala like to use statistics a lot in our peace research, I made a table which actually shows, and I will hand it over to you. It will be handed for you. It actually shows the states which, shout out to my department, which actually show the status of additional protocols. So in total, 127 states have either voted for the treaty or signed it. 50 of them don't have additional protocols, and that's a concern. Most of those treaties states do not have significant nuclear activities. Some of those states are in the process of ratifying it, but some states with significant nuclear activities, like Brazil, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Venezuela, Iran, refuse to conclude the additional protocol. So this is now we have a problem, and these concerns were raised in between two rounds of negotiations. They were raised at the negotiations by Sweden and Switzerland, for instance, but I was not able to find the answer to the question, why was additional protocol omitted? So I will now conclude. I want to be very clear. This is not the responsibility of ICAN. The treaty was adopted by the sovereign states. They bear for the responsibility, and this omission does not take anything away from ICAN and their award. But I do hope to see that ICAN will closely monitor how this treaty is being interpreted and how the state behave according to the treaty. We do not want to see that states use this treaty as an argument to circumvent their commitments according to the NPT. So this can be really a blow to the effort. So my question to you would be, if you know, if you would like to share, what happened to the additional protocols? Because I was not able to find the answer. And the other a recommendation for you, I have a suggestion how to move things forward. I think that ICAN should really use this moral leverage it now has to really urge all the states to sign the additional protocol. That would be it for me.
Thank you. Quite a lot of questions there. and I think Beatrice and Josefin, you have heard some of these objections before, so please, can you help us sort this out a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for your kind words as well about ICAN. I think you're wrong.
Sorry?
I think you're wrong.
Okay.
The treaty, the NPT, has in legally binding requirement to have a comprehensive safeguard agreement. The NPT has never been able to agree on the additional protocol. It's a voluntary commitment from some states. And the majority of states of the world have signed on to that. But there are tensions in the non-proliferation treaty that some states, like Brazil, for example, a very vocal country about this, rejects agreeing to more commitments when they think that the nuclear armed states are not fulfilling their commitments. They say it's unfair that they are upholding their end. They're not developing nuclear weapons. They are upholding it. They're fulfilling the comprehensive safeguard agreement that they agreed on. But the nuclear armed states are not disarming what they agreed on. So they think, why should we have all these extra things? Why are you making stronger and stronger rules for us when you don't do anything? So they are using this as a leverage. And this has been a fight in the non-proliferation treaty for 20, 30 years. So fast forward to the nuclear ban treaty, where exactly the same conversation is going on. And, but what the treaty said, the treaty does not go back at all. The treaty says that what you have now, you have under the NPT, you have to have, which means that all the states that have signed the additional protocol, that's the level they have to have in the ban treaty. But it also means that additional things on top of the additional protocol, like the comprehensive, the Iran deal, the joint program of action that they have, which is much stricter, it's even a third level there. If Iran signs this, they locked into that as well. So it doesn't go back. It wasn't as ambitious as we wanted. We would have liked an additional protocol, I think. But it doesn't, it sets it at the same thing as they have at the NPT. So it doesn't actually roll back anything. I think that's where you're wrong. The additional protocol in the NPT is still voluntary. They've never been able to make that a legally binding requirement for all states. And this is a problem for the NPT to solve. This is not something we can solve in another treaty. So I think what the treaty does quite cleverly is to sort of cap it. So all the states that are signatories to the additional protocol will have to have that in this treaty as well. And we are going to encourage more states to sign the additional protocol. But this comes with this whole package of tension between the non-nuclear weapon states and the nuclear weapon states, which is a bit difficult to solve right now in these negotiations. And at the same time, I think we have to remember that this treaty, I agree, this treaty is not the end goal. This is not a treaty within the actual disarmament will be negotiated, just like the NPT hasn't disarmed a single nuclear weapon either. That is something that the Russia and US do together bilaterally, and that's where all the detailed discussions about that. The nuclear armed states know themselves most about their nuclear weapons, and they are going to have to negotiate this. And we could not spend time on negotiating how they would disarm, because that will look very, very different for different countries. The timeline, the verification for a country like North Korea when they disarm, their 20 war, I don't know how many they have, nobody knows, but a few, compared to US or Russian 7,000, it's going to look very different with different technologies, different timelines. So I think that has to be open for the future, and that's something that the nuclear armed states, when they decide that they want to disarm, we will solve that problem.
Okay, Josefin, you have anything to add on that?
I don't think that's much to add, but yeah, just to develop a little bit more about what Beatrice talked about, because that was also the intention of when negotiating the treaty, to leave it open. It was important to have some kind of hook to get the nuclear armed states in, but that would be, as you said, up to further negotiations between the nuclear weapon states and the states parties of the banned treaty.
So I think the important thing here is to see the distinction. I mean, this is a treaty between states, and they act for a couple of other reasons. ICAN, the point with ICAN is really to push the nuclear weapons issue and ban the nuclear weapons as the central thing. And the states are making all kinds of other considerations. And is that a dilemma? I mean, because you are working in a way as a pressure group, as a campaign, but then you also will have to defend a result which is not really the one you may have wanted yourself.
I think the treaty is good.
Yeah.
I think it does the job. It's a framework as well. There's the saying, you can write the perfect treaty, but you can't negotiate that. And there were like 122 different versions of the perfect treaty in the room. It's a lot of different, that is just negotiations. But I think this treaty, the nuclear weapons issue is such a complex issue. It's so technical and it's detailed, and it's going to have to be taken out from the multilateral at some point. So this treaty is a humanitarian law instrument. It sets the framework, and the actual detailed disarmament, that is up to the nuclear armed states in the end. And they are going to do it. And that is also involving a lot of state security issues. Dismantling nuclear warheads is also going to mean that you know how to make them, which means that it's not something that can be done in the public eye. In the way, these things are very complicated. So the way that the Russian and the United States have done in their new START agreements, for example, that is a model for future. But it's something that needs to be done by them. And then you can have the IAEA verify, of course, but that's a whole sort of other thing. So I think it's obviously a challenge for a campaign like us to explain very complex issue in a way that people don't fall asleep when you talk about it.
Yes.
So, of course, this treaty is a norm-setting instrument, much more. This treaty is much more like the Geneva Conventions, the human rights treaties, the Convention Against Torture, than it is a technical verification disarmament treaty. And I think that a lot of people confuse those types of legal instruments. They have two different roles. One of them is very technical, and one of them is more the norm building, saying this is acceptable and that's not acceptable.
And Augie, do you have a problem with that?
No, I agree. This is an ongoing debate in the NPT forum. That's true between proponents and opponents of the additional protocol, and I'm afraid to see, I really would not want to see that they will now introduce the ban treaty in their debates and saying, no, we don't have to sign additional protocol because ban treaty does not. I like this expression, forum shopping. So they might pick and choose what provisions they prefer. I do think that that this treaty should have stipulated that all states should be at the end of the process subject to the same verification regime, because this actually allows that some states we do not have additional protocols. For instance, in the ideal situation when we have the United States and Russia with additional protocols, Iran and Brazil would not have to have it. So I don't think that I think this is a flaw, and I also think that it's also a very powerful one of the this ammunition against the treaty actually by its opponent. This is why I want to discuss these issues, because they say, how can we disarm? But we can never be sure that Brazil is not developing its secret nuclear program, and that's a very powerful argument that they use in order to discredit the agreement. So this is why I think that ICAN should be really mindful of that, and I think that it should have a strong standpoint that all states need to have additional protocols at one point. So.
And Beatrice, you would agree with that?
Well, yeah, of course. I think that the day that the nuclear armed states are ready to disarm, I think we can make a lot of progress on also the verification issue. I think no country at that point would have a problem with following the stricter guidelines and things like that. But at the same time, I think these tensions should not be used as an excuse to make progress on not wanting to use nuclear weapons. And I think that that's really the key part of this treaty. It's to rally the international community around this idea that nuclear weapons are now unacceptable. Using nuclear weapons is not okay. Threatening to use nuclear weapons is not okay. Possessing nuclear weapons is not okay. And that is also progress on non-proliferation. Because right before this treaty, we have had a system that say nuclear weapons for some are okay. And it makes you really powerful, and it makes you really special. The cool table, the security. So I think it's also like we've had a situation where the entire world has spent 70 years saying that nuclear weapons equal security. And of course a state like North Korea or even Iran are going to listen to that. And this treaty also rejects that kind of thinking and changes the perspective on nuclear weapons, which is going to be necessary if we want to prevent countries from ever developing nuclear weapons.
And of course, all countries formally agree that we should abolish the nuclear weapons, but it's just the right time that seems to never come.
And they say, they have this kind of circular argument that all countries, including the nuclear armed states, yes, we will eliminate nuclear weapons, but we will keep them until they're gone.
Yeah.
And they are really good for security, but we will eliminate them. But we will be so insecure without them, but we will eliminate them, but just not now. So it kind of breaks that circular argument and say, now you have a choice, yes or no. Are these weapons good for security or are they not?
Josefin.
Yeah, I think it's what previously was said. I think it's really important to highlight that this is not a disarmament treaty in that sense. And I think also in the negotiation room, people got stuck in the notion of now we need to fix everything that has not been fixed before, the flaws of NPT, the flaws of CTBT. And I think the forum for the negotiations of the ban treaty was not the right forum for that. That was not a mandate, and also it's not this treaty's job to pick up all loose ends from all other treaties. I think we need to really consider this as a humanitarian treaty and a normative treaty, which includes certain elements of prohibitions that might lead us to think it's a disarmament treaty. But I think that's a mistake and was not the intention of starting negotiations.
It's very good to hear that from the both of you, because it clarifies a bit the discussion, because it tends to be easily going into details and regard this as a sort of a blueprint for disarmament. So I think that's an important statement. Beatrice.
But I think this is really one of those, I think we see it all. If you want to do something to improve it, the skeptics and those that don't really want to do it demand that you fix every single problem in the entire world, otherwise we won't take a single step. You fix it. They look at us. Yeah. And it prevents progress from happening. And we see that, I think, in all sort of social justice issues. It's like, how are you going to solve that? And how are you going to ensure world peace? I mean, I've gotten this question from State Department officials. well, you know, you want nuclear weapons use to be illegal. How are you going to solve forever, guarantee forever that there will not be a single war ever again?
Call me when you're done.
Yeah, but I mean, you use those things as excuses for not do what you actually can do right now, and it prevents progress from happening. So I think we have to be strong enough to say, no, we can do this. We don't have to solve every single problem in the world before we solve this issue right now here.
Sounds like a good response. Tell me, what are you planning to do now? What will you do now? Because we have the 122 that signed this one, and now we have a period where they also, well, now they will sort of sign it more formally and then ratify it. Is that going to be your job to push that, or are you moving to something else? Or what is your plan now?
And now we move on to social justice.
Yeah.
No, that's going to be the main focus for ICAN for the coming period. And maybe you, Beatrice, want to tell a bit more about the fund, but we set up a 1,000-day fund.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the whole campaign is slightly exhausted right now. It's a couple of tough days in Oslo.
Sure.
But also extremely energized and ready to get to work. And we have gotten a huge platform to take this work forward with. Lots of new people that want to get engaged and are coming on board as supporters. So I think we have, you know, a very exciting period ahead of us. So we decided to use the prize money to set up a fund called the 1,000-day fund, and it comes from this tradition, 1,000 paper cranes that they folded in Hiroshima, or makes you get a wish, I think. That's a legend. In 1,000 days, we're going to achieve some really significant progress. That's the goal. To get the treaty to enter into force, we need 50 ratifications. And this is quite bureaucratic stuff. It's not so exciting as negotiating the treaty. It's more have to go to parliaments and get the national legislation in line with the new treaty, and then the parliament approves it. So it's a lot of harassing people on a national level. So we're going to use the funds to strengthen local and national campaigning around the world. I mean, it's a global campaign, but the progress happens locally and nationally. But we're also going to use the funds to use the treaty as a campaign tool in the states that haven't signed or aren't going to sign in the near future, such as the nuclear-armed states, such as NATO states that have nuclear weapons on the territory, such as Sweden, who really need to step up a little bit. And to really mobilize people and make this treaty have this normative effect that we talked about, that it's not just about joining or not joining, but also challenging certain behavior. If Sweden cannot say that we will never use nuclear weapons, we will never use a weapon of mass destruction on civilians, then we have a problem, I think. If Sweden can't agree to that kind of principle legally, then we need to talk about with the Swedish authorities and government, in what kind of situation would Sweden use a weapon of mass destruction to kill civilians? Or be a part of that kind of activities. When is that acceptable? How would that work? How would you respond to that? What would you going to do to protect people? Why would you violate the laws of war? So we have to use this treaty now to put pressure on these states. So that's also what the fund is going to be used for. So we have kind of two parallel tracks: strengthen the membership of the treaty, and then using the treaty. And the stronger that gets, the easier the job on the other side is going to be, and vice versa. And then use the treaty to question certain behavior, question modernization programs, threats to use nuclear weapons, fire and fury, start campaigning against these things.
That sounds as a good plan.
Promise to.
Yeah, and I think we can get support also from students at Uppsala University. So let me open up and see if there are some questions here. You have the microphone. I think there is somebody in the Utrikespolitiska föreningen who would like to start, so please.
Hello. As you said, my name is David and I'm from Utrikespolitiska föreningen. First of all, I would like to thank you for coming here and giving this talk. It was very interesting. The question is, as you touched upon, North Korea seems to argue that nuclear weapons provide them with security. How can we provide that security in some other ways so that we reduce the relevance for nuclear weapons? Thanks.
Thank you, David. Would you like to tackle this issue of North Korea? Yeah.
Yes,
In
I'll
all-
tackle the issue of North Korea.
You are prepared to tackle most things. So.
Thank you very much, and just really excited to have Utrikespolitiska föreningen here. My first experience with this issue was at Utrikespolitiska föreningen in Stockholm. That's how I got involved, and then got my first internship, and then got to go to Geneva, and then got to do this job, so awesome. North Korea, yeah, that's kind of a very difficult issue, and touches a little bit upon this, that we have to solve all security problems before we tackle certain weapons that would violate the laws of war. And I think it's quite important to separate nuclear weapons from the idea of peace, because they are just weapons, and giving up nuclear weapons is not going to give up military power. It's not going to give up the need for national defenses or military. And I think that sometimes nuclear armed states want this to be very strongly connected to the security and stability of the world, because then it will be, getting rid of nuclear weapons is going to be this utopia, this day that everyone, there's white doves everywhere and we sit in world peace. And I think that's quite unrealistic. So I think we have to see them as just weapons. We have gotten rid of other weapons of mass destructions, or other weapons that once was so essential for security. Even things like cluster munitions and landmines, chemical and biological weapons, they were used as, these are very essential for our security, until you saw what they do to people, and trying to reframe it as we have to protect people. It is a security threat to have nuclear weapons. And I think the situation between North Korea and the United States right now is an example of where nuclear weapons absolutely do not provide security and safety and stability. It doesn't feel like peace in that region right now. It doesn't feel like a stable situation between North Korea and the United States. Rather, nuclear weapons are increasing tension, increasing the risk. It's the whole source of the conflict. We might go to war because of nuclear weapons, rather than having peace because of nuclear weapons. So I think it's very important to challenge this myth that nuclear weapons and weapons of mass destruction somehow provide stability. The whole war in Iraq, with so many civilian casualties, was because of weapons of mass destruction, and these that fueled that conflict and led to that conflict. Tension between the world and Iran has because of suspicions of this nuclear weapons program. So they fuel conflict rather than prevent them.
Yeah, Josefin?
Yeah, I think in addition to that, getting rid of nuclear weapons will also open up the market and liberal ideas. And also, if we look at investments of nuclear weapons, that is a billion-dollar industry. If we can divest from the nuclear weapons industry and make companies stop producing nuclear weapons and financing, that will also open up more economy and incorporation between states, as you said before. It's not peace between US and North Korea. It's just not war. And I think that's also an important. I don't think people in North Korea feel that they are secure. I don't think that many Iranians were feeling very secure before the Iran deal. So I think getting rid of the sanctions, and I think that will open up a market and an economy, and open up for liberal ideas and more security for people.
Can I just add something? Because I think it's a really important point that we keep coming back to, is that we need to see this issue as a part of a bigger movement from this state security towards human security. And that is, instead of just looking at different nuclear weapons treaties before, we have to look at this as a progressive change in the world. The Cold War is over, and we are moving from a world where the state had the right to do whatever they want to people in the name of state security. They tortured people, they refused to give them democracy, refused to give them their human rights, and we have made all of these international laws that starts to protect people and not just the state. And this, we have to see this as a part of that. The state should no longer be allowed to threaten to slaughter indiscriminately hundreds of thousands of civilians as security. So so we have to see this as, we ban torture, we have human rights, we can't use weapon of mass destruction on people. as this kind of a progression of the international order in a way.
Josefin.
And as long as nuclear weapons exist, the risk is that they're going to be used. And in the situation in North Korea, US, I'm really worried that nuclear weapons actually will be used, and that would cause catastrophic consequence for people, for the environment. Thousands, hundreds of thousands of casualties, and the environmental will be for decades contaminated. And studies have shown that a nuclear war, even a limited nuclear war between India and Pakistan, would lead to nuclear darkness that will prevent crops from grow and risks 2 billion of people to die from starvation. So I mean, even if you would be a believer of deterrence and those policies, the risks are too high and the stakes are too high to believe in this, because there will always be accidents, even if they would not be used by intent, and the consequences would be the same. And it's the people around the world, it's the humans that will have to pay the costs.
You refer to a study that was actually done at Stockholm University.
They have done something as well.
On the limited, what is called a limited nuclear war between India and Pakistan, and that definitely shows, as you say, it would not just be something that affects just South Asia, because of all the soot and all that comes up in the atmosphere. It will spread around the whole planet, and one of the results is that it will lower the temperature in the planet for at least 1 degree during a year or two. So it's really a global catastrophe. Even a limited war is a global catastrophe if you use nuclear weapons. We have, I think there was one more question from the Utrikespolitiska föreningen, and then there is a gentleman over there. So
we'll try to be a little bit shorter answer next time.
So who is? Okay. So we'll go with the gentleman over there. And please identify yourself.
Thank you for bringing light through a dark time. The question, my name is Adril Bakal, from the perspective of peace education and culture of peace. You have handled the international relations, the legal aspects of the treaty, but you also mentioned myths, perceptions, and it has to do with education. So how do you intend to put, what kind of actions to change this kind of very selective perceptions, the popular education, popular culture, to move from a culture of violence, which prevails, to cultures of peace? For example, in the South, people say nuclear war, that's a problem of the rich countries in the North, those that have nuclear weapons. So what happens, wherever it happens, it won't affect us. So how do you address these issues? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you'd like to respond?
It's a good question. I mean, I think that the more we talk about nuclear weapons, the better. I mean, I think that nuclear weapons issue, what's the most dangerous is when we don't think about it, when we are somehow in denial of the problem. And this is also what those that defend nuclear weapons kind of want. They don't like people to be engaged in this. They want to make it an issue for only experts, only, you know, high-level people that has PhDs in physics and stuff. Maybe you had that here. That it's too complicated for normal people to engage in. I think we have to fight that, and we fight that through educating people, to talking about it. And that's why I also think that when there are these high-risk scenarios and tension growing, we have to see it. Obviously, it's terrifying. It really is a dangerous situation right now, and we might actually see the use of nuclear weapons sometimes if we don't do something. But it is also an opportunity for us to raise awareness. And I don't think I've worked on this issue for 10 years, but many people say that they have worked very long with this, that this is not since the 80s have we talked so much about nuclear weapons as we do now. And I think that's a good thing for us. I think we need to remember that these are, so we need to do a lot of education about this issue. And then just keep questioning it through democratic processes. Are we okay with being a world order where democratic countries threaten to slaughter humans? I mean, we wouldn't say that with other weapons. We wouldn't say that our military has the right to go into other countries and chop up people with machetes as deterrents. I mean, that would be bizarre. Why would we do that? But why are we okay with doing that with nuclear weapons? So I think that we need to expose this issue and talk about them as weapons. These are weapons with consequences, not just a symbolic power tool that we throw around as a bargaining chip in international forums.
Very good. We have a question up in the very back there. And while you walk there, part of this question was also about education. You studied international relations. Did you deal a lot with nuclear weapons at the university?
Not really. It was mentioned a little bit like when your first course in international relations, when you do the theories, realism, liberalism, then it was a little bit about nuclear weapons and this deterrence, but very much, again, as a power theory rather than a weapon. And sometimes I feel like we attributed too much power to nuclear weapons. We see them as special and something that they aren't. They are just weapons. It's just a big dirty bomb, really big. But it's nothing more than that. It is not going to be. The world is so complex, and this weapon isn't that connected to other things. It's just we made it like that, and we can also remove power from this weapon by just not seeing it as a powerful thing, but more a shameful thing.
And that's what this treaty does, and it can be used as a tool for making this happen, and to be used in the public, also for an educational issue.
That's a good idea. Yep, please.
Yes, my name is Johan Brochet, and I'm a researcher at the Department of Peace and Conflict Research. And I want to add on to that when you talked about Sweden. I mean, first of all, I think that it's really shameful that Sweden hasn't signed, and that we really have this bizarre situation in Sweden where it's like peace movements and banning of nuclear weapons are used as something bad or are securitized issues, to put it a bit more scientific. And as a peace researcher, I'm worried that peace research itself is going to be added to the list of securitized issues. So I wonder if you can develop a little bit about the experience you have had on the work in Sweden, and also what measures we can take to try to really see these issues, what they are. So does Sweden want to sign a treatment against nuclear weapon, or does it not want to do that? Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been an interesting run since this summer in Sweden in the debate, and we know that the foreign minister has an ambition to sign the treaty, but the government hasn't decided, and there will be a commission for almost a year to evaluate the consequences of Sweden signing the treaty. And I think it's also very important to evaluate the consequences of not signing the treaty. Where will Sweden be? In what group, in what alliances would Sweden be in if Sweden will not sign and join the treaty? And I think if you look at the treaty, if you read the treaty, there's nothing in the treaty that prevents Sweden to continue with other military cooperations. There are no legal aspects. It's just a political issue. And the pressure that US and other NATO states have used on Sweden it's a very clear sign that this treaty is an effective treaty. It's a good treaty that will and already has proven to be effective on the nuclear weapon states. They are scared. They have tried to stop this movement for many years since it started. So they know this treaty will affect them. And I think Sweden should be in a position to just confirm the decades-long work on nuclear nuclear disarmament. It's nothing new for US that Sweden is an opponent of nuclear weapons. And I think the treaty would be a very good sign for Sweden to use in discussions with the US and other military alliances, that we will sign this treaty that will not affect our cooperation. And I think Sweden joining the treaty is the one who should take the analysis of what they can and what they cannot do. US cannot decide for Sweden what they can do and cannot do. States outside the treaty cannot decide what and who are breaking the treaty. It's the treaty states themselves who make that decision. So I think that's something we need to continue discussing in Sweden, and we will, of course, do. And I thank you for being a promoter for Sweden signing the treaty, and it will be interesting to discuss that further, I think, with the academics.
Oggi and then Beatrice, last word.
Just a short one. As someone who comes from Serbia, I would like to defend Sweden on this issue. I think that what I noticed is that Sweden is also concerned that it doesn't want to be dragged into those NPT divisions. So I think Sweden is probably one of the reasons why we want to wait and see how this treaty is going to be interpreted in that respect. So it doesn't want to contribute to furthering the divisions in the NPT community.
Beatrice, final word on the importance of this treaty and ICAN.
I think it definitely shows that the treaty is effective. The US would never put this. They say it is irrelevant without them. This will have no meaning. Yet it is dangerous for their nuclear arsenals that Sweden would join. So obviously it would have meaning. And right now we are seeing a very dangerous situation where direct threats of using nuclear weapons are being made in a way that we haven't seen in a very, very long time. In Cuban Missile Crisis, probably. And I think it's very concerning that at such time the Swedish government is not able to stand up and say no to that. That somehow Sweden is still thinking that perhaps someday we would need to use weapon of mass destruction to kill a lot of civilians. I mean, that's just really, really concerning. So I think that by not signing this treaty, you are aligning yourself with the behavior of Donald Trump at this point. They are the ones that are opposing this. They are the ones who want to keep their nuclear weapons. They are the ones who want to be able to make those threats unbothered. So we have to make up our minds as Swedes. Are we okay with that? To stand silently behind threats to totally destroy a country? And the same thing for North Korea's threats, of course. Are we okay to be a part of that conversation and just be silent? Or are we going to join those that say that is unacceptable? We don't use weapons of mass destruction.
Okay. Thank you very, very much. Thank you, all of you. Thank you, Oggi, for asking some pertinent questions and handing out a bit of statistics. That always helps life.
I'm going to take this.
Yeah. Thank you, Josefin, for your work here and with the SLMK, and particularly on the Swedish front, so to say. And thank you, Beatrice, for all this international work that you do and for sharing with us not only the shock of receiving this prize, but also demonstrating that you have the enthusiasm and the energy to go forward. And your little group there of 3.5 persons, I think
we're many more around the world here as well.
I think we can get more interns and others who will join you in this really important task. And for me, it is particularly warming as it relates so much back to Alva Myrdal and the prize 35 years ago. Here is actually something that has happened that really sends a very significant message to the Swedish public, to the international public, and to the world. So again, join me all in thanking and congratulating ICAN and Beatrice and Josefin for their great work. Okay. Okay.